iMac is back, and so am I, and I was very interested in what Apple was going to do with the new iMac because I have an iMac Pro that was brand new in the fall of 2017, so I've been feeling the need to upgrade, and I was hoping that Apple would come up with something that would be right for me. I was very excited to see what Apple did. I am generally a fan of every decision they made with the new iMac. And I'm very excited about the direction that iMac seems to be heading and the design language, which is consistent with other design language that I'm a fan of. We've talked about that before, going all the way back to iPhone 4 and even into iPad Pro. Rocket.
My name is Chris Bintliff, and these are transmissions from Not Really Rocket Science, where we study the technology, techniques, learning, and lifestyle of the modern marketing engine.
And now we're seeing it in the iPad. All of that very exciting. And this iMac is not for me. And Apple did a great job, I celebrate that, in letting me know. Great design can, and I would argue should, be polarizing. It should stir emotions, which means some people are going to love what you're doing and other people are not going to love what you're doing. If everybody feels kind of meh about it, then you're in the realm of mediocrity, and that's not great design. So it was really interesting, just like with AirPods Max, how everybody in the Twitterverse and in the Redditverse and the YouTubeverse and the rumorverse had feelings about the new iMac and about its design decisions and its colors and that it has a chin and all this kind of stuff. What was interesting is right away with the marketing materials, Apple made clear who this iMac is for. If you've watched some other videos, I've been critical of Apple's marketing, particularly with iPhone 12 and 12 Pro. I thought it was just plain sloppy. It was never clear who is this for. They started talking about internal techno sort of language immediately that I think can be alienating and isolating to somebody who doesn't understand all of this Apple isms and is new to the product. HomePod was never clear really even what is this thing. You had to be an Apple person to be excited about and know how HomePod was going to serve you. Talked about this before. Go ahead and jump into some of those videos. So I was very excited to see Apple immediately saying very clearly in its marketing, here's who this product is for. If we look at the images and the videos, it's families, it's kids, it's entertainment, it's light duty office work, it's home office kind of stuff. They even are thinking maybe you want to put this in your kitchen. And so that immediately said, well, this is who it's for. This is for the other 98.9% of people who aren't obsessing about Apple stuff in the Twitterverse or the rumorverse or the Redditverse. This is the people who are going to use this in their homes or in their dorm room or in their apartment or whatever. That makes sense, certainly with the 24-inch display. Not a lot of professionals are thinking that 24-inch is exactly what I need. Every pro I know is looking for something larger. And so a lot of the questions or a lot of the decisions, immediately, if you put into context of who is this for, it almost diffuses them. They stop being very interesting. All of the colors, which I love, surprisingly, the orange is my favorite. It's this weird creamsicle kind of thing. They're going to look great in somebody's, house or apartment or living room. And Apple has said, we're trying to make this a device that fits into your sort of home decor or the environment that you're placing it in. That's not super important to professionals who are just kind of looking to get something done in their office and are really focused on performance. That's really important to people who have this stationed in the corner of the living room as the household, computer for whatever. This opens a lot of doors for that, and I was excited to see Apple saying this is who it's for. Even if we look at some of the marketing language that Apple uses right away, which that's kind of for me my barometer. What are the headlines that Apple is starting with? That almost sets the tone for if they're on point with their marketing or not. Apple is famous, in my opinion, for getting this right or wrong. I've talked about that in some of the other videos. They get it right with this one. The first things you see when you see the headline on the digital marketing on the website for the new iMac is stand out in any space, fits perfectly into your life. It sets the tone. And then the very next thing that Apple focuses on is the colors, which is the most obvious thing, and it's going to be the most attractive thing to people diving in. As you scroll down and as you move through, you get to learn about the performance and the really cool display and all of the great things that it does for you, but it's focusing first on what it promised. It's going to stand out in any space and fit perfectly into your life. Great. Good for them. to know who they're talking to and to then speak who they're talking to. We've got a whole video about this, about how great brands know what you're interested in and they prove it with their marketing. So this is talking to Apple's largest customer base for the iMac, which isn't me, the pro. It's not the 27 or the 30-inch user. It's the 21 or the 24-inch user. And so they're starting there. They're doing a great job. I really like what they're doing. I love the colors. The colors are a cool throwback, but also just, it's very fresh and very relevant now. It would have been in some ways disappointing to just have silver and space black again, even if that's what I'm in the mood for. I love that they're doing something different and new. The thinness is really cool. I don't disagree with the argument that why do we need a chin? Why don't we just make this thicker? I think there's some thermo advantages to having the chin. You got to move some of the stuff that gets hot away from the display. But I think Apple could have figured out a way to dissipate some of that by making the display thicker and eliminating the chin. But again, two things with that. One, it ignores that the chin is a feature, not a bug. It's something that creates a palette that is attractive and interesting for what Apple's trying to do for this audience. But the second thing is the thinness isn't about common sense. Common sense or conventional wisdom might say, make this thing thicker and, nobody cares how thin it is. Nobody sees how thin it is. That's not how Apple rolls. Apple often does things like, again, good designers do, that defy common sense or conventional wisdom. And the thinness aspect is part of that conversation. I think as I look at it, or maybe you look at it, you can say, well, why don't you make this thicker? Nobody cares how thin it is. The thinness tells a story, a dramatic story. And it's one reason why Apple features it so heavily right away in showing the silhouette or the profile of the iMac. They want to sort of stun you with how amazing it is that they can do this technologically in such a thin form factor. And you or I might think, I don't know, is that important? That's part of the DNA or the design vocabulary or the approach that Apple takes. Sometimes it defies common sense. Sometimes, I would argue, it just merges into the realm of bad design. See also Apple TV remote. See also AirPods Max, terrible case. See also the way you got to plug in the mouse. I'm going to argue that late Johnny Ive era was sort of indulging in the worst minimalist impulses of this, which is how we got some of those products. But the point is, it should almost, in Apple's mind, I think, look like a piece of art as a piece of technology. And they focus on that obsessively sometimes. Maybe sometimes they pull the pendulum too far in that direction. And sometimes I think as a designer, you have to do that. You have to get too far so that you can sort of find that middle ground. Now, as a consumer and a prosumer sort of oriented company, they have to then also balance that with, well, but what does the marketplace want and what are they saying? And that's where you get maybe what's happening with the new Apple TV remote, where we've listened, or with the MacBook Pro, which the previous iteration had not enough professional ports. It was compromising functionality for the sake of design. Apple does this, frustrates the customer. Then they listen to the customer, and sometimes they come back to earth, and sometimes they don't. What was it, like 7 years with the old Apple TV remote? I mean, this is Apple. It's what you get. But the thinness tells an important story from Apple's perspective, and it takes a flag in the ground, and it kind of says, we're different. This is different. This is remarkable. It's a completely different design language than what you're used to from iMac, and this is where we're headed. I think that's interesting, and I applaud it, and I like it, and I'm okay with it. And I'm okay with there being a chin to accommodate the thinness. And I like that it's not an artificial thinness like it was with the old iMac, where it looked really thin. If you remember some of the marketing for the old iMac, it looked like it was super thin, but that's just because they were sort of tricking you with the photography. It was really deeply rounded on the back. I like that none of those compromises exist with this one. This is a pretty interesting form factor, and if it's where iMac is headed for like the next decade, I'm on board with that. I think that's super cool. I do think that there are some things that don't work so well and won't reflect very well in the real world. I think it's sometimes Apple's great frustration that people actually have to use this thing in the world. See also all of the examples I just shared. But so the back and kind of creating this duotone front and then back, and giving it an interesting color. I think that that's cool, and thinking that, this could now be on display in any way in a room. That's interesting. I don't know, what is it? Probably 99% of people have their computer in the corner, partly because that's just convenient for how people like to, organize their space. But I don't think that will necessarily change just because Apple's doing something sort of remarkable. But more problematic is all of that sort of elegance and interesting, beautiful perspective of this colorful back, and looks great from any direction in any space. The minute you got to plug something into the back, that's kind of shot. It just looks like a weird collection of wires. So as soon as you're plugging in, an external drive and an SD card reader, because this doesn't have one, anything like that, you're just going to get this weird rat's nest of cables. It's going to look awful. It doesn't look great. I think if Apple was going to be all in on this sort of looks great from any direction, they could have done a couple things. One is put the ports on the bottom of the iMac instead of on the back. That would introduce its own frustrations and friction, because you'd have to sort of figure out where is this thing, and I can see people trying to, see underneath their computer, so that's not great. Or since you've already moved Ethernet to the power adapter, which by the way, a lot of people had feelings about that. I thought that was kind of a good move. I like that there's this single cable that comes in. Again, this minimalism works and looks and really feels great. I love that they color coordinated that. But again, that's also that it looks great from any direction, but as soon as you plug something into the back, that whole aesthetic is kind of shot. So they could have also put multiple ports on the power brick, more USB or whatever. Now that would have introduced its own problems, because who's going to use a cabled keyboard plugged into the power port? I don't know. So Apple paints itself into a corner with some of this stuff, where we want it to look beautiful and minimalist, and please don't plug anything into it so that it never changes that sort of beautiful minimalist aesthetic. That's just not how people use the technology. It's not how they use the devices. I have some familiarity with this real world issue because I do have my desk situated in the middle of my room. When you walk into my office, the first thing you see are the back of my computers. And I'm obsessive, almost to the point of illness, about not seeing cables. It drives me crazy. If I could hide the power receptacles in my office so that I never had to see one. And so I try to accommodate that or hide that stuff however I can. So you can argue that my efforts to sort of minimize this look of cables plugging in have just, brought more attention to cables being plugged in. I don't know, it works for me. But look at all the sort of effort that I've had to put into managing cables so that I don't feel like I'm looking at a bunch of cables every time I walk into my office. Very few people are as nuts as I am about this kind of stuff, but it sort of reinforces my point that as soon as you start using your technology, that minimalist aesthetic, that beautiful look at how it's all color coordinated and we've got one single cable, it's so easy, that just gets shot. And now you're accommodating the real world where people are using this technology. Looking at the front, the bezel, everybody had a lot of feelings about the gray or cream bezel. Again, it really works for this audience. Doesn't work for me, because it's true that a black bezel, it creates, as you're looking into the light of the monitor, that bezel kind of becomes invisible. It doesn't draw any attention. The same is true of the chin though. I don't spend any time thinking about or looking at the chin of my iMac Pro. It's space gray, but I would prefer probably a dark computer. So, if this came in a space gray or a black, that would be for me the better choice because I don't want any visual interest around my screen. But I'm not who they're talking to with this. This is for somebody who's gonna not at all care about the cream-colored bezels, or that's even just gonna add to it. The thing is, as soon as you get into color, as soon as you introduce the color, you kind of have to go with some kind of, either it has to be the same color around the bezels, or you gotta choose a lighter color. You're not gonna choose a black bezel to go with this creamsicle orange or this sunflower muted yellow. That probably wouldn't look too great either. So those are the decisions or the trade-offs that I think had to be made. And I think that they, again, are features, not bugs, for who this computer is for and for what Apple's trying to do with it. The M1 chip is amazing. You can absolutely do professional quality work on this iMac in ways that maybe you never could before. And I think that's really exciting. I think it's really exciting for people who are kids, students, amateur or hobbyists or enthusiasts, or young college people, you could legitimately get some serious 3D rendering or photo editing or video editing done on this new M1 powered, sort of consumer grade, pretty to look at iMac. That's awesome. You're going to learn and to do some powerful things and not at all be limited by the technology you're using. For me, I'm holding out that we've got a larger iMac on the horizon. If it's a Pro or not a Pro, I don't care what it's called. I hope it's bigger, 30 or 32 inches. Colors aren't interesting or meaningful to me. I'd be happy to lose the logo on the front. That was another polarizing thing for people. I like the minimalist aesthetic. I don't love logos in any case. And so I was very happy to see that was off of there. If there's a chin, that's not a big deal to me. I don't think it's a big deal in the real world. It'd be really cool if everything was kind of minimalized in an XDR display type of a way. That'd be really great, but I'm not fixated on any of that stuff. I'm holding out that we've got something much larger. I want ports galore, so we've got to have tons of Thunderbolt. We've got to have USB-A because people still use it. I don't want to be limited in any way. An SD card reader, yes please. None of that silly design stuff can apply to the workhorse that I'm hoping that Apple comes out with. Hey, really quick, if you wondered where I've been, and some of you have, and have reached out, and that's genuinely very nice, like super thoughtful, kind of touching, thank you. I'm fine, there's no big story. I just got really busy at work. I've had a couple huge projects that I thought would be done by February or March. They went longer. Fun stuff, rewarding stuff. If you're curious about what I do, I'll be happy to maybe share some of that in a future video. But what I do here is important to me. And so I put a lot of effort, especially into some of the longer, more thoughtful pieces, and it takes time. And I haven't had that kind of time, unfortunately. And this isn't my job. So it has to fit in between my job and the demands of that and my family time and all that other stuff. So I haven't figured out yet how to sort of make that more consistent. And I think one thing I'm unwilling to do is compromise on how I like to express myself here. So I don't think I can make like shorter, snappier, briefer content. I just have to let this organically be what it's going to be for now. I do have some things cooking. They're in production. One is a discussion on Hermes and the sort of quarterly drop that they had a couple weeks ago that I thought was really interesting. I've got an ultimate review that I'm working on for the Bang & Olufsen H95 headphones. I've been using those for about a year. I've got a video about the AirPods Max, of course, and my experiences with those. I've been working on that since December. And then I would just love to share with you what I do here in this space. I've really cultivated a space, and a lot of people have said, as you've seen the videos, hey, show me your setup, talk more about this and talk more about that. I'd love to. And so there's all these things that are cooking, and I hope that you'll stay with me in the kitchen because they are coming in time, and hopefully sooner than later. Anyway, that's what I think. What do you think? I will see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe and comment on transmissions from Not Really Rocket Science. Learn more at notreallyrocketscience.com.